moving too far into the fact-checking world is also something we have to be careful about. And that's something that I experienced in my journey also. But so I grew up raised like that. Like I never went to Sunday school. We didn't have one when I was growing up. My brother and I were like the only two Muslims in a high school of like 1,600 kids. So that was kind of my upbringing. And so like academics was like the most important thing. And then athletics, just kind of keep us healthy and stay out of trouble. So that's kind of how I was raised on the East Coast. And then I went to undergrad medical school in Chicago. So I kind of became like a Midwest Muslim. And I had never, like I said, I never knew Muslims growing up. I had like some friends that we'd see at parties, my parents' family friends, but I never had a best friend who was Muslim or anything like that. So I wanted to move to Chicago and it's like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like everyone, like I have all these best friends around me. And it was actually interesting because in Chicago, it's such a given. There's so many Muslims there that people didn't see how special it was compared to how I thought how special it was as someone who never had Muslims around me. So, and Chicago had a very kind of strong influence on my understanding of Islam in many ways. I was like, a lot of my friends were kind of traditional thinking. And I feel like I was very protected because I was involved in the college Muslim scene and stuff like that. Had I not had that, I don't know where I would be right now. And so then after that, I went to medical school at Northwestern. And after I finished medical school, so this is in 2002, I was studying in a library and I had this very specific moment where I had like these stacks of books on all this coursework for this board exam I had to take. And I was just feeling frustrated that like I knew these books inside out, but I didn't know the Quran inside out. And so like my background was like, I knew I wanted to know the Quran. I knew theoretically that this is the most important book in my life. Like if you asked me what's the most important book, I would say, oh, the Quran. But like, I didn't actually know why, like what was in it that was so important to me. I just knew that like I was raised with that culture. And I was like an active Muslim, like active. Like I was very active in the MSAs and I was like on the leadership panel. So like I was someone who, like I wasn't someone who was like jaded or didn't get it. I was someone who was like totally into it, okay? Just so you understand my context. But even then, I had never read the Quran cover to cover, like never. And I've read all these other books in science, like I memorized like figures. I knew all this stuff about stuff I didn't really care about in medicine. And I was like, why can't I know the Quran cover to cover? And I have to get out of my mind this idea that Allah is like this mean professor who like doesn't want me to pass the class. Because sometimes when you fail at the book so many times, you're just like, okay, you know, like you guys have had this, I'm sure. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm just not a math person. Calculus is just not my thing. And you kind of just move off to like something else. Or you can say like, you know, history is just not my thing. It's too complicated. I don't understand it. Or writing or journalism, whatever it is. Well, Allah is like not like a mean professor, but like you'd start creating these narratives in your head. It was like, I don't know, I'm just not a reader. Like that, you know, a lot of people say, I'm just not a reader. I just need to listen, or I just need to be moved. And we have all these narratives that we create in our head. And I had to clear my head of that and be like, no, Allah wants me to know this. This is supposed to be easy. This is supposed to be my invitation. This is like a love letter to me. Why am I struggling to read a love letter? And so I promised myself that day in the library in 2002 that like after I finish this exam, I'm going to know the Quran inside out and master it. Okay. Now recognize that was the language I was using at the time. It's like, I want to master the Quran, because that word mastery was the same kind of attitude I had towards medicine. It's like, I need to master the material. Okay. And I just thought it was a very, if you can kind of hear it was very academic. It was very like mental, because that's who I was. Like after medical school, I was like this, I was like very fit mentally, like a thoroughbred. I was like, oh, let me just race. So the more I can know, the better I am. And that's kind of like my mentality going into the Quran. But what I realized, and for those of you who've tried this, is that the Quran is like, the Quran is very hard to read. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to accelerate you a little bit. I probably took up too much time, and I want to ask you so many other questions that
yes.
Yeah,
please.
Focus
please.
you on how did you decide to do the book? Like,
the book wasn't a decision.
And translated into the book, and how did your journey connect to the book? And I appreciated every minute of your journey.
So the book wasn't a decision. The book was just me. I realized that I can't study the Quran. It was too hard for me. I didn't get the material. It was too, like, I was just feeling disconnected and I felt dejected. And I was just like, this is like the 40th time I failed this New Year's Eve resolution. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. Maybe my key is to connect with the Prophet. And if I just hang out with the Prophet, then the revelation comes to me. So that was like my big like aha moment. If I hang out, I call it the Abu Bakr coaching plan, ABC, Abu Bakr coaching. You just hang out with the Prophet, peace be upon him, be his best friend. When he gets revelation, he'll call you up, be like, oh, check this out. This is the latest download. Okay, I'll take the latest download. And it's given to you in context, in time to what you're going through in the moment. Like you were talking about compromise in Hudaybiyah. Like I don't need to know about compromise in like year 1. Like let's actually have something to compromise on in year 19. So that's why Hudaybiyah is not important. Surah Fath, which is about Hudaybiyah, it's not important right now. So we're not going to go into that, even though it's one of the first surahs in the Quran in order, not your problem. So go with the kind of the organic approach. And that's what I did. So what I did, I just took notes. So the book was just me. I have it in my other office. I could have brought it out. I just have like a box full of like papers, notes. It's just me being a medical student about Islam. That's what the book is. Okay. And then like, I can't help like not drawing out a diagram. Wait, they're married to so-and-so. I don't get it. And you scratch it out, rip it out. They're married to Hamza, is Safiya's sister. But then I thought there was the uncle. And then you got to keep. So that's what the book is. It's just a lot of notebook pages where I kept drawing this stuff out because it didn't exist anywhere. And I was like, where is this stuff? How come no one's done this? This person has talked about more than anyone else in human history, but no one's done like an English like family tree. Like what's going on? And so I kind of, as I was developing my notes and they're getting bigger and bigger, I also had this developing inkling, like, why isn't this out there? And this is helping me so much. Maybe I can compile it and send it. I was actually thinking I'll send it to Zaytuna College and they can do, like they can, I had just like a stapled page, packet of notes here if you want to do something with it. But it just kept growing and growing until the point where I realized my note collection actually was becoming more valuable than the books I was studying from. So I was starting to refer to my notes more than I was referring to the sources because it was organized better. And because I could pull out the information better. And I had taken all the best at that time source material and put it together. So if I want to read about Hudaybiyah, it's like, oh, this is what 7 people are saying about Hudaybiyah right now, as opposed to opening up 7 different books. And so my book became more valuable to me as a resource than the other books. And then I was like, okay, I should do this, present this to other people, because if it's helping me, maybe it helps other people.
And did you end up finding a publisher? Who's Whiteboard Press?
Whiteboard Press, this right here, this is Whiteboard Press. So okay. This is, I actually went and talked to several Islamic publishers, and this gets into this idea of how, you were talking about meeting the moment and leaning into it and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is this is like the first like Zoom that I've done. I've done like a lot of Zooms where we're using this kind of language, which makes me so happy because that's the language that you're in the space that I am in, which is meeting the moment. And what is the moment? So for me, like some of the, I've learned now to share some of the pitfalls along my way because people recognize that like none of this stuff is easy. Like compromises, ups, downs. This is why we study the Prophet, because our own life in the moment that we're taking will have ups and downs. So I had so many ups and downs, like so many hard drive wipeouts, like it's embarrassing, right? And I've lost like 3 days of work. And I'm telling myself, this is the moment. Because no other author is now going to retype over another 3 days what he just lost over 3 days. But this is my moment to retype that. And this is a test. And that's why I'm going to keep pushing when everyone else is going to stop. And it's stupid. You're comparing like a hard drive wipeout to an autosave problem to like the Battle of Badr. But that's our battle, right? It's like different contexts. And it's like, it's hard. You'd cry. I mean, how many of you have cried over losing data, right? So it's like, so for me, it was about meeting that moment. And so finding publishers, I went to all these different Muslim publishers. There are not that many who I actually wanted to go to, but the ones who are like very reputable that I wanted to go to, brother, we don't do we don't do color. We only do black and white. I'm just like, what? Like, that doesn't work anymore. Like, come on. Like people need, on the best topic, you can't make the prettiest book. Like so after I looked around at different people, like another one was, we need every single diacritical mark in all the Arabic names. I was like, that's not gonna work for me because that just creates a barrier to entry. I don't want it where people like look at a name and it looks like algebra instead of English, because of all the Abdullah ibn, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, no, these are my important things. Access is very important. So in the end, I ended up forming my own company. I said, I'm just going to do this on my own. I believe in this. I know this is helpful for me. It was helpful to my brother and my sister. And I was like, I'm just going to just do it and see what happens. And so that's kind of what happened with the publishing.
So follow-up question then, connected to one of my core themes is the question of sources. So your book does this cool thing where you draw from both old sources and new sources, and both Muslim sources and sources outside of our community.
Yeah.
And for me, I really appreciate and respect that combination. I am so skeptical of most sources. How did you decide on which sources were credible? And I forgot to mention, you also layered the historical sources with the modern commentators like Hamza Tariq Ramadan and Reza Aslan, and I'm sure there are women in there forgetting. So there, how did you decide who to source and what was valid enough? What was your methodology?
So a couple of things. First, for those of you who aren't familiar, Sira is like one of the most what's the right word for this? Non-vetted, or I don't know. I don't want to say unreliable, but it's like, it's not the most concrete of the sciences. Okay. So Hadith, Quran, obviously. So for example, you cannot make a ruling or fiqh based on Sira, because like they were just like, dude, just bring everything in. Let's bring all the stories together before we lose them, and then just write this narrative. So Sira has had the most flexibility, which is good and challenging also. It's good because you get all this stuff. Because if they're really hardcore about it, we may have lost some stories which may have happened, or add color, and it could have been a drier story. But that's kind of the challenge with Sira. It's like, how do you know what to trust? So I just started with Martin Ling's book, which most people know who study in the English language. It's like the most vetted book in the English language, and the most popular book in the English language for people who really want to know the Sira. So I started with Martin Ling's book, and I was like, if people have a problem with Martin Ling's, like he's above my pay grade. So, I'm kind of relying on him to back me up. And so Revelation was actually a Martin Ling study guide. That's what Revelation was in 2002 to 2007. All of my documents, they just said Lings. That was like how I titled all my documents. It was the link. And even my family, because this took me about 14 years to write the book. For the first 12 years, the only people who knew about this book were my parents and my brother and my sister. No one else knew about it, because it was a very private, personal project for me. And they always refer to it as Lings. Oh, how's Lings going? And Lings was just the name of like this project that I had. What I found is that Lings didn't have everything there was stuff that was missing in Lings. Missing meaning like that I thought was important, and I was surprised he didn't mention. Not a lot, but there was some stuff in there. And so I went to other sources to supplement Lings. And then I realized, oh, there's other interesting stuff out here. So I went to the Sealed Nectar, which is like kind of like the Lings of the East. So you have like the Lings of the West and then the Lings of the East. And I was like, okay, if I can take these two sources and put them together, I've covered what both of them have left out, but like a Venn diagram, I'm covering everything. But I'm not adding anything that they didn't put in there. So I was like trying to stay very safe with my sources. And those were like the two backbone sources. And then I had the commentary, which were in those yellow boxes. And that was just like the best commentary that I could find at the time. This is 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, when I was really kind of doing the research part of it. And I realized this is like a decade ago. There is so much better content out in English compared to what was available then. Classic example, for those of you who know Sheikh Yasser Qadi, he's done like 150 episodes on Sira. They're like over an hour and a half each, like very academic. That didn't exist back then. Sheikh Abdul Nasser Jangda with the Qalam Institute has like 200 plus lectures on Sira, very specific. And these are traditionally trained scholars, but who were American born. So like we didn't have that back. All we had back then that I knew was Sheikh Hamza Yusuf's 24 CD set, which is what I put in my book. So those were the sources I had. I was like, this is the best I can do. I don't think any American Muslims are doing, or English speaking Muslims can do better than these sources here, because I'm not seeing it. So I went with that. And that's kind of ultimately what created my book. The reality is now I'm writing my second edition, and I'm like really moving stuff around now. I'm getting rid of some commentary. I am honing in on really trying to clean up. Is there anything that's questionable? I might not take it out, but I'll put a memo saying this story has been debated, X, Y. Like the story of the Prophet, peace be upon him, going to Syria and that monk Bahira saying, oh, I see, you know, the clouds are falling and so forth. According to some scholars, that's actually an inauthentic story. So I might not leave it out, but I might put in the side note, you know, some scholars believe this may have happened or may not. So just so people have a better sense that there's some critical analysis of what the storyline is in this. So that's kind of like a background on the sources. Like I'm proud of the sources I put in, but where I am now in 2020, would I put those same sources in? Not necessarily.
Okay. That's really helpful. It's an ongoing or evolving process, and I'm excited to hear that there's a second edition in the works, because it's a living project. I hope for you and for all of us. I want to incorporate a couple of questions. I see one at least in here. In the chat box, someone asks, which one is the most impacting book of Sirah for young men and women interested in learning Islam? Do you have any favorites?
So when people ask me which book to read, you know, like I'll have friends who call me up and they'll be like, hey, I'm going for Hajj in 3 days. Yeah, it's like, what should I read? You know, and I'm like, that's kind of tight. The book that I always tell people to read first is Karen Armstrong's book called Muhammad. It's like a pamphlet. It's thinner than Leslie Hazelton's book. And I feel like in many ways, she just captures a lot of the themes without going into too much detail, without getting too academic. It's written by an American, you know, I think she's British, right? I think she's written by someone who's British. She understands the issues we might have about like polygamy. She like kind of gets into that. It's not too Eastern in terms of its language and stuff. And so that's the book that I tell people, if you want like a first dose of reading, I tend to go to Karen Armstrong's book because I just think it's the easiest of all of them. And then, you know, after that, it depends on the interest level. And these things, you know, I don't like to overwhelm people, because what I don't like is when people go to Sirah or anything, like if they go even into like, you know, photography or whatever, and you just give them this really complicated camera and be like, here, you're going to love it, and put it on manual mode. Like you're going to scare everyone away. No one's going to want to be a photographer then. So you just give them something simple. You just teach them basic composition, some cool tricks, and then they fall in love with the hobby. Then they can upgrade their gear. And that's kind of how I look at it with Sirah also, is that you kind of try to find what clicks with the widest audience in an authentic way. And then people who want to kind of start going deeper into it can go into it. So that's the book that, when we're talking about books, that's the book that I recommend.
Ooh, okay. The British author is Karen Armstrong. So yeah, somebody else to type that in. I see the ask there. Going back to, so I shared some of the key themes that emerged for me and some of my biggest learnings. You had noted that a few of them resonated with you. I was also curious about what were some of your biggest learning? I mean, you took the journey over, as you said, 13, 14 years. Which is a remarkably long time. So what were some of your biggest learnings in the journey? And I'll stop there.
Okay, these are the 5 themes that I picked up from you, which spoke to me a lot. Okay, number 1, you wrote meeting the moment and our own personal journeys. Number 2, you mentioned paradigms, and you mentioned the Jewish tribes, polygamy, and so forth. Number 3, you talked about this concept. That's three. Okay, 3, you mentioned the concept of leaning in, right? Leaning into the story, struggling with the story. I was looking at my book. Like I don't read my book. That's the one thing. So like I have to like look up stuff now. And you know, I was looking at my book and I have this paragraph. And I said, there were several times during this project when I could not reconcile my pre-existing understanding of Islam with what I was reading. In retrospect, I found that these difficult moments of inner conflict and struggle yielded illuminating truths not about Muhammad as a prophet, but also about me as a believer. So that struggle and that fight, like, I don't like this. Like, no, like I agree with it, but not that. That's too much for me. And then going into that dark place, like that cave or whatever, that's like that's where the fruit is at. Not staying safe in the light, but going into the dark places to open up things. That's where like the transformation happens. And so that was a big one. And then number 5, this concept of orphan. And I truly believe in the end, one of the powers of the Prophet ﷺ being an orphan is that we are all orphans. We are all orphans, especially in this modern day of social media. We are all orphans. We are friendless, fatherless, motherless, alone in the sea, and we're just trying to do the best we can. And how do we navigate, and who has been our caretaker along the way? And so those are the 5 biggest themes that you mentioned that really spoke to me. I think if I had to pick one of them, I would say that number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So understanding paradigms, leaning into the struggle, so effectively communicating, and being an orphan, those all are subsets of number 1, which is meeting the moment. And so what I tell people, and this is like, I'm so thrilled that you brought this up, because again, I feel like I have to introduce this concept, but you're the one who's introducing this. And this is like really exciting to me, is that I always tell people, when you read the Sirah, it's very easy to get into the weeds, get into the details of it. And we have to be very careful. For those of you like hobbies, and I've been in all these different one of my personalities is like, I like to really dive into things deep and become that thing. So if I'm into photography, I become a photographer. I assume the mentality, and I get really into the gear and the nitty gritty. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you've forgotten the big picture of the fun of it, right? It's a very typical thing that happens in like every field. It happens in Islam also. And so what I always tell people is that people get into the weeds about, for example, the Sunnah, following the Sunnah, right? Allah says, He gave us the Quran and the Sunnah. Those 2 things, we hold on to those, like we're good. And the Sunnah is so often about like the beard and the clothes and like did you say the dua before you ate? And did you use your right foot before you walked into the masjid? And like I'm not trying to minimize that. But I feel that what that has done is taken our focus off of what I call the super sunnahs, which I feel like there should be a better word for that. If any of you have one, you can type it below. But these archetype sunnahs, and these are the big things that were so big, you couldn't actually put a name on it, because it was a theme of a lifestyle, not an actual event or a procedure. And to me, the biggest sunnah of the prophets is that they were asked to play such a big game that they had no idea how they were going to do it. Okay? The biggest theme of the prophets is they were asked to play a game that was so big, they had no idea how they would do it. Did you guys hear that? So I just read yesterday, the prophet used to repeat things 3 times as a communicator. So the biggest theme of the prophets, peace be upon them, is that they were asked and invited to play a game that was so big, they had no idea how they would do it. The classic example, the prophet who is mentioned the most in the Quran, like by a long shot, like he like dwarfs 2, 3, 4, and 5, is who, guys? Who do you think it is? Type it in. I see a brother. Let's see, who is that? That's Kaz typing in. Moses. Absolutely. Like Moses. Because Moses, in many ways, is the most similar to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He's like a prophet. He was in many ways orphaned, like he had just sent down the Nile. He's being under these different caretakers. He said 5 houses for the prophet. Moses is being shipped around. His mother comes back and is there for him in the beginning. And now he has to lead a nation. So he's a prophet. He's a messenger with a book. He is a leader of a nation, all this kind of stuff, right? He has to flee. He makes a hijrah from Egypt, right? And just like the prophet made a hijrah, Moses is making a hijrah and leading his people. So all these things. But when Moses is being asked to do it, Allah invites him. And he's like, okay, let me show you a couple signs. And then he says, okay, now go to the Pharaoh and tell him what's up, right? And Moses, remember, Moses was, in his eyes, an ex-convict. He had killed a man in Egypt. And now he's like, you want me to roll back up into the White House and tell the president what's up? Like, that's not even conceivable for like a notable who the Pharaoh loves to tell the Pharaoh to change his ways, let alone someone who's a wanted man in Egypt. And Moses doesn't say how am I going to do this? He just says fix my tongue. I know me, my knowledge of self is that I have issues and I need to work on myself. You will take care of the mission. I will just fix myself. And I will walk the path that you are sending me to. I am going to walk into the moment. And what you see, which is crazy in the story of Moses, is along the way. See, Moses, we have this idea of this man who's like this, right? I'm making a staff out of markers here, right? This is how we think of Moses, right? Everyone, he holds his staff and he's like, part the Red Sea. And we have this moment of like, and like, it's just like this guy on a mission, right? But if you look at the story of Moses, Moses is like scared more than any other prophet. Like throughout the Quran, he got scared. Allah says, don't be scared. Then he got scared again. Allah says, don't be scared. So what you see in the journey of Moses, this guy is like growing. He's meeting the moment pushes back on him, and Allah is like pushed through the moment. And that's what you're seeing in the story of Moses, which is why, and now the question is, why is he so mentioned in the Quran? Because the Prophet Muhammad is like, dude, that's my coach. He's like, coach, show me how to do this, because now you're telling me that I'm not only Moses, I'm playing this not just for Bani Israel, I'm playing for this bunny world. Like this is for the whole of humanity now. So there's so much riding on this. And so to me, this idea of meeting the moment is the sunnah. And where it comes back to us is that I feel now that whatever we're doing in life, not all of us have our mission yet. And the mission often comes to us, right? Like I'm not a writer. I wasn't a big reader like until about 10 years ago. But the mission comes, or whatever your mission is. Your mission, and the mission might be things that you hate. Like I have very close family members who are single parents right now, who have 2 kids. And they're having to chuck all of their missions that they thought were heroic and sexy and whatever, because their mission now is just to raise 2 kids. It could be whatever that mission is. But the mission is, it's got to be something that you don't know how you're going to do it. Because if you know how you're going to do it, you're not playing a big enough game. And to me, that's the sunnah of the prophets. Is that it's got to be such a big thing.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said that's the challenge to us all, that extends, going to the question of what is the prophet's legacy. That feels like that's the next question I was going to ask you, and that feels like the beginning of your answer to it. Is how that takes place. I want to ask you what you think. What your actual answer would be to the question of what do you think Prophet Muhammad's legacy is. And then I see a couple of questions in the chat box too.
Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at, I agree with someone who wrote that sometimes people focus too much on the superficial rituals, they lose sight of the bigger intention. I completely agree with that. Someone else wrote, I have a struggle when it comes to learning about Islam and Sirah because of my career. How do you manage time between studying medicine and researching your book without burning out and giving up? Okay, great questions. Okay, so let's see here. And then your question was, what is the central legacy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how are we gonna put this together? I think, okay, let's start with the central legacy part first, because that's because you're the host and I should answer the host. No, okay. The central legacy to me, so you listed the very beginning, you listed like these 4, you can't read them, but I wrote the 4 things down that you listed, which were character, critical thinking, community, and leadership. And I kind of was looking at those words and I kind of reorganized it like this. And I said, okay, character was in the middle, community, critical thinking was around it, community is around that, and these are all just a subset of good leadership. That's kind of how I kind of was thinking about these themes as you were talking right now. Mm-hmm. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was very clear. He said, I have only been sent for one thing, and that is to perfect human character. There's a very famous quote of the Prophet. So we don't have to like hypothesize too much about this. He said very clearly himself, I have only been sent for one thing, and that is the perfection of human character. And so we have to recognize that, and I'm on this journey myself, like I'm actively figuring this out, having conversations with my siblings and my family and my spouse about it and so forth, is that this is the heart of everything. This is it. Anything else is an abstraction, or anything else is an excuse for not dealing with this. Because this is the hardest thing, that it's so much easier to go to the periphery and do superficial things. It's the heart of the matter, and it's in the center of it. If you have excellent character, everything else becomes a manifestation, a natural manifestation. All the other sunnahs become natural manifestations of a heart, okay? I'll give you an example. When I was in Boston, when I would go into the hospital, there was this quote in the front of the hospital, and it was like my favorite quote, so I memorized it. Because you have to understand, in medical school, as a physician, you have to take all these classes on like medical ethics and bedside manner, and like, make sure you sit down when you talk to a patient so you're at eye level. Make sure you don't use like, medical jargon when you're explaining, decision making. Make sure you ask questions, body language. You have to like learn all these things to like, because you're not a human being anymore, right? So you have to learn how do you connect with other human beings and so forth, right? Then when I walked into this hospital, it's a famous hospital in Boston, and I walked in like on the first day of my training, and it said on the wall, the key to caring for the patient is caring for the patient. The key to caring for the patient is caring for the patient. The key to caring for the patient is just care for the patient. If you care for a patient as a human being, you wouldn't like stand up and talk to your mom and be like, Mom, I'm sorry, you only have like 3 years. You would never do that because you care about your mom. So if you actually cared about human beings that way, you would be humble when you were talking to anybody. You would sit down. You would not lord over them and be arrogant and stupid as a doctor with bad bedside manner. So in the same way, to me, the key to following through on the message of the Prophet, peace upon him, is having good character. If you have good character, you can't be humble. It's impossible. You cannot be greedy. It's impossible. Your heart's gonna hurt for people when you see tragedy. It's just natural manifestations. And so I feel like it's easier for a lot of people to focus on the outside in, right? Oh, let me grow the beard and let me visit someone who's sick because I get 20 points. And then the angel wrote 20 points and I did it on Jummah, so 20 times 5 is 100. And they get stupid Islam about it, like accountants, right? Instead, be like, dude, do you care about people in your community? You'll go visit them anyway, regardless of whether it's Friday or Saturday. That's the key. And so to me, that's a legacy of the Prophet Muhammad. If you perfect the human character, which he showed us how to do, everything else becomes a natural manifestation of that. You don't have to worry about the sunnah and the rules because it's like, there's no other way to be. So that's my answer to that question, Edina. And that's a lifelong journey that, we die along the way, we achieve it to some level. But to me, that's the answer to that question. I'll answer that question about, I agree, the sunnah and the rules come naturally when you purify your heart and it radiates out, which I'll just add to that. Think about this one thing, because this is something, so like I have this podcast, which I started on YouTube during Ramadan. And the central core of this message is what we're just talking about, is that if you look at the Quran, the way it's structured chronologically, there are very few rules that came in the first 13 years of Mecca. All the rules came later. Okay, so if you look at the 5 pillars, right? Shahada, so testifying to God is one. That was Meccan, okay? The prayer, 5 daily prayers came in year like 10. If you follow I don't know the Gregorian years, the Quran year 10. So 10 years in, now you have to pray 5 times a day. Before that, just 2 times a day, pray at night, do the best you can. Fasting didn't happen until Mecca. Hajj didn't happen until Mecca. Zakat didn't happen until, Medina, sorry. So the rules and the regulations, alcohol and all that stuff, what to do and how to be a Muslim, those rules came later on after people had like nailed the center part of it. So that by the time they're like, okay, can you give up alcohol? They're just like, alcohol. But these were people who used to be drunk. These were people who were addicted to alcohol. But they worked on the inside, and so the manifestations on the outside came out later. And so that's what I would say to that. As to the question about how do you do all this stuff in medicine without burning up and giving up, it gets into this whole idea of motivation psychology, which I'm like into, intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. Like I believed in this. I love this. And to be totally transparent with you guys, like, 15 years is a long time. I went through a lot of stuff in those 15 years. I was married. I went through a divorce. I was like single for like 5 years, and it was like very lonely time for me. I had moved across the country. I'd started a new job. So I was going through a lot of like ups and downs of life. And the only constant in my life at that time was the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. He was like the only friend who I could pick up a book and I would like feel connected. And my posse was like the companions. And it was like, it's such an amazing time of my life. Like I didn't have a lot of friends, but these people always showed up. Whenever like I rang the doorbell, they'd be like, okay, let's hang out. And so for me, that kept me going, is that I felt very appreciative that this was given to me in my life. These people came into my life when they did. Because I had like a lot of great plans of singlehood, especially like after divorce. You have like, your mind starts racing. Oh, like now I'm free. Well, I could do this and I could do that, or I could rewrite my story and be a new person in a different place. And so I could have gone in many different directions. But I vividly remember, it was actually in 2010, I was driving from Boston to Arizona, and I had 2 months off between my jobs when I switched jobs. And I was like, wow, I've never had 2 months off in my life before. I should do something amazing with 2 months off that I'll never regret that I wasted 2 months. I felt all this pressure to do something amazing. And my first instinct was like, oh, I want to go to Europe and just like travel the world. And maybe I'll find someone in Europe and I don't know, whatever. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I've never spent time with my siblings since we left college. And so I weighed, should I go to Europe or should I go to Kansas? Because that's where my sister was living at the time, and just spend 2 months with my sister in Kansas. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I actually actively made a decision to spend 2 months with my sister in Kansas. And in that 2 month period of time, I really I really went into the book hard. That's when I came up with the circular diagram. That's when I came up with the glossary. And that's kind of like the heart of the revelation came out in that 2 month period. So it was like, you know, it was just like, I was committed to this. I believed in this, and I didn't care about the result. And that's something that my wife taught me, is like, you can't be connected to, she always tells me, and I'm going to butcher this now, but she says, you can't be connected to the end result. You have to be connected to the vision, because the end result's a moving target. It's going to change. And so you just got to be connected to, this is why I'm doing it. And this is what feeds my soul. And that's the only, if I was writing a book on Abraham Lincoln, like I would have died, but on like, you know, in the second year, I would have been over it. So.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing, the hard part of stories too. That's been a guiding theme for us. So I appreciate that. Last question, and I'm looking at the clock. Maybe we can go over if people are interested, but I want to respect your time and everybody's time and close on time. So I'm looking to see if there's any new questions. Okay. So somebody followed the rules and did the all caps question. A quick reaction, if you could do it quickly too. What do you think of the movie, The Message?
I haven't watched it in a long, long time. I think it's so, and I watched it as a kid, and I remember loving it back then. So yeah, I think it's great. I know there's an Omar series that's out, which is like very like accurate, I believe. I haven't watched that too. So if that's your medium, like I would say to go with it. My hesitation watching movies, I was talking to my brother about this because he loves the Omar series also, is that I have an idea of who these companions are in my head, and I don't want it now to be an actor. I know it sounds kind of silly, but like, who was the guy who played Hamza in The Message? It was Anthony Quinn, right? So for like a whole generation of people, Hamza looks like Anthony Quinn. And like, I don't want that to happen to me. Like, I have like this like cool view that's personal to me of what these companions look like. So I don't want to be like, you know, Brad Pitt is like the new like Zayd, you know, even how I don't want that. So like, you know, I like to have my image of these companions and how I imagine them. So that's one reason why I don't like feel like I have to flock to it that much. But they're great. They're great ways to connect to the Sira and to kind of reinforce your knowledge and so forth. So.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, my last question has to do with one of my central themes, which is, or that I didn't talk about earlier, which is I walked into this embracing what I was taught by my teacher, Dr. Maher Hathout, give him a spacious resting place eternally, which was a relationship with the Quran where he would always ask us, what is the text saying to you? What is God saying to you when we would read the Quran? And that is the primary reason that I'm still Muslim today, was because of that approach. And that approach also embraced the idea of unanswerable questions. That we are encouraged to ask unanswerable questions. And so I'm going to share a few of my, some of the questions that have emerged for me that are sort of unanswerable questions, the I wonder questions. And I'm curious if there are any that have emerged for you too, that you might want to share. So here are a few of mine. In thinking about how Prophet Muhammad lived his life, especially this week, but again this week, I ask myself, who would he be standing with? How would he be? How would he be responding to what we are seeing and witnessing today? What words would he be using that would combine the message with the audience and and center the people who are most impacted. Another question for me that came up halfway in the journey around the question of the wives, all the wives, is a question that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life, which is, I wonder if Prophet Muhammad and Khadija talked about and planned for him to marry a cadre of women as his partners in disseminating the message. Like, I wonder if they were in cahoots about it, and or what their internal dialogues were. Which is a question I ever asked myself before. Another that I will always hold, my unanswerable question, is why didn't they have a succession plan? I just don't understand. With all the meticulous care, planning, and strategy, why, dear God, was there not a succession plan? And I continue to hold the question as much as I have fallen in love with the stories and I embrace the stories. I am still, my next round with the Sira is going to continue to ask the question, what is true? What is true? Like, what do we really know? And this kind of connects to the, which I didn't ask you about, the Keisha Ali 14 facts, you know, kind of
Right.
sure versus what we think we know. So those are some of my unanswerable questions. What are yours?
So we have like 4 minutes left, it looks like here, and I'm trying to figure out how do I, because what is the take home and how does...
Raise your hand if you give us permission to go over by about 10 minutes. Yeah?
Oh, I'm fine with that. I'm happy. Like, I love talking about this. I don't know if my family likes me talking about it all the time, but I'm like, you're talking about it again? I'm like, hey, I love it. What can I do? So if you guys are up for listening, I love discussing this stuff.
Okay, so
for me, my
and then I'm going to take the last 5.
Perfect. So I think my biggest question, and I think this will maybe dovetail into something that I do want to hit on as a word of caution and as a word of encouragement also, is we have narrations that there are companions of the Prophet, peace upon him, who said, and this is not a direct translation, that basically the Prophet, peace upon him, told them things that they couldn't even share with the rest of the community, because you wouldn't be able to handle the stuff that he told us, okay? And I want to know, what were those things? What were these inner secrets of being in the world, spirituality and so forth, that he told the companions, such that when the Prophet ﷺ died, the companions like spread out over the world? Like, what did he give them with? And be like, can you imagine? It's like a father's dying and you have this moment and you're just like, son, like, if there's one thing I haven't told you my whole life, I want you to have this. And you say the thing, like, what is that thing that he gave to these companions that lit their fire? Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, was like a spark, and he ignited the hearts of all the people around him in Arabia. But now you have these kindlings of companions who are now going out and have to be messengers also, right? Lowercase m, messengers. So what did he give them that lit their heart? That's what I want to know. What were these secret conversations? What did he talk about with Abu Bakr? When he used to visit Abu Bakr every day in his house. What were they talking about? There's so much of unrecorded history. And so what I wanted to do, so that to me has always been like, oh, I wish I could be privy, like a fly on the wall for some of these conversations. But to me, it suggests a few things. It suggests that, when we get into this world of paradigms, okay, no matter like how hard you try, you will always be stuck in a paradigm. Like, being out of the box is just another box of mentality. They're like, oh, I'm so out of the box. Like, I'm so woke. No, that's just another paradigm of conformity to other people who think they're out of the box, right? So you cannot escape paradigms. Everything that you do will be through the context of your life experiences. Even running away from your life experiences is just another experience of your life. So you cannot get away from the filter that you are putting on what you're trying to study. Now, one of the filters that we have, which has been very difficult for me in my journey, is I come from a science background. Edina, you come from a journalist background. So you're like, primary sources, give me the facts, who said it, can I trust this, this witness? Does they have a corroborating witness? Like, I'm not gonna, put my life on the line where I can't prove that this is gonna be true, especially when it comes to my life. It's not like a story you're typing out. You're trying to figure out how to write your life. And what I have found for me, and this is a paradigm that I think we have to, as people in the West, as people who are living in the 21st century is that when you look at epistemology, which is like the study of knowledge and like how knowledge comes to us, right? Our paradigm of fact checking and like what is the truth, and if I don't see it, I won't believe it, that's actually a paradigm which can be very limiting. It can be very empowering, which is true, because you don't want to be like someone's like, oh, he said it, so let's believe it, and now like I believe, and like you don't want to be like someone who's led away by craziness. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us this. If you hear something, question the, who is the person sending it to you. Our hadith tradition is very authenticated. Thankfully, like they had the foresight to do that, so we have this amazingly scientifically understood body of knowledge that they did for us. So that's good, and we want to stick with that. But in the personal journey of you guys and for me, what I've realized is that, like, remember I told you in the beginning, and just to bring it full circle now, I said I want to master the Quran. It was a very mental thing. What happened is, like, I would be in Starbucks and I would just be like typing away on my laptop, and then I'd just be like start crying, and I'd be like embarrassed. I'm like hiding behind my screen because the barista's like, who's this weirdo like who's crying in like the coffee shop. But that's what was happening, is as much as I was fighting it, the journey was moving from here and like moving down like into like my heart. And I'm like, oh, put it back up there in the brain again, because that's where my comfort is, right? And it's like, and I'm feeling like an orphan. I don't know who, like, am I ever gonna have a partner again in my life? I don't have kids, and I'm lonely. And then the Prophet's an orphan, and I'm like, oh, it's like coming back into my heart again. And I'm like, push it back into the head. What I realized is that that's because my paradigm growing up has always been mental, right? Mental. And see, like my parents, they grew up in a place where they saw people who were all emotional in the East. There was very little critical thinking in the East. So they just took everything. It was all like, a lot of just prayer and supplication and rituals, and a lot of just like singing and nasheeds and all that kind of stuff. There wasn't a lot of this. So then my dad, it was like, turn this off and turn this on. So then I grew up with this, and I was like, but this is wanting to turn on, turn it off again and turn this back on. What I realized that there's a balance between the two. And a lot of the knowledge and this fact checking, it's very much up in this brain. And there are times as you get into the story, especially with the Quran, especially like if there's one place where you kind of got to like start reading with your heart, it's the Quran. And I was like, I've given up on mastering the Quran. I've given up on it. I thought it could be done. It was like 600 pages. Dude, I've learned a lot more complicated stuff than the Quran in medical school. And I realized this is not meant to be mastered. It's being meant to like change the heart. And I just got to keep reading it over and over and over again. And it's just like perfume. It keeps making something sweeter and nicer and nicer. Don't try to just master it and be like, the Arabic said this and the root word was this, and look at the noun, pronoun. Like, you can do that, and that's a way to get to the Quran. But like in my own journey, and I feel very strongly about this, is that our paradigm has been too mental. And the reality is most people don't want this. Most people connect with their hearts. We all connect with our hearts to other people. We like our relationships because of this, not because of this. So the greatest relationship of all is a relationship with Allah. Why would that relationship be a mental relationship? It's a heart relationship. And so what I'm realizing, and it's funny because I had these moments with my dad. Like I'll give a talk and I'll start crying in my talk. And then like, I'm like, oh no, because I know my dad afterwards is going to be like, you're crying too easily. Like he says that to me because he's not used to that. He's like, when you cry, you're looking less, I don't know what the right word is. And I'm not trying to throw my dad under the bus, but that's just his, a lot of me is because of him. But when you cry, you're sacrificing some of your professionalism and your authority by crying. But what's interesting is what I found when I talk to people, when I'm more emotional and speaking from the heart, that actually is way more powerful for me and for the community than like an interesting factoid or a cool analogy or like a fun metaphor. So there's a balance between the two, but that's been my journey. And so I don't know how we got to that, but over fact checking is a danger. Fact check so that you can believe the corpus of material, whether or not he did this one thing or not this one. Like I went to this masjid in Southern California, and I was asked to talk at this mosque in Southern California. It's a very traditional mosque, and I went there. They just started circling my book, and then the question was, did you believe? It was something. It wasn't this, but it was like this. when the Prophet, peace upon him, went to the mimbar, the tree groaned. Do you think the tree really groaned because he was no longer leaning on that tree? Did that really happen? And my reaction to that was, look, I'm not a scholar. I don't know. Whether that tree grown or not doesn't change like what I have, the kind of husband I need to be when I go home from this study circle right now. And to me, it's like, if it groaned, that's great and it's beautiful and it's touching. If it didn't groan, it doesn't take anything away. But like, if I'm gonna spend 2 hours diving into that thing, that's 2 hours that I could have played with my son and built a beautiful relationship with him, which is the sunnah, which is to connect to your children and to raise them all. So to me, that's how I feel about it. So it's a dangerous game. And we're warned a lot throughout the Quran, don't get to, it's constantly asking us, haven't you thought, haven't you considered, don't you think, where are you going? But at the same time, it says, when the people are talking about the dog in the cave, were there 3 dogs and were 3 people and a dog, 5 and a dog, 7? Don't worry about the details. So this is balance. And so that's just all put out there.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And and that resonates so deeply for me as well. One of our threads throughout this process has been take what speaks to you, to your mind and to your heart, and leave what doesn't. Because Sira, like Islam, is spacious, and there is what we know and there is what we think we know. So that really resonates so deeply. Dr. Miraj, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your book. Thank you for making yourself available. Thank you for changing from tomorrow to today. Thank you for all of it. I want to do another plug for your book. I have, thanks to your support and help, I still have about 15 in my house. And so there are folks who reserved books or asked for books that I have not heard from yet. And so I invite you to reach out to me. My email is edina.consulting@gmail.com. Would somebody type that in for me so I don't have to multitask? I'd appreciate you. And the books are, thanks to Dr. Miraj, for us, they are $40 rather than $80. And I hope that after hearing him and his journey and his relationship with the book and with the community, that you invest in his work and into the second edition and into the pursuit of knowledge that is more accessible and integrates diverse sources, both old and new. Thank you.
Can I add one thing here real quick?
Go ahead, and then I'm going to do housekeeping in our du'a.
Okay, quick. This is my hypothesis, and I want you guys, I hope, to prove me right on this, is that people right now in the world are hurting a lot. People are going through a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty. And I would say the number one leading cause of that is a feeling of loneliness. And then on top of that, all the stuff that we're experiencing this week and so forth. It is my hypothesis, and I believe this to be true, that people will find the beauty of Islam as the best means for them to manage what they're going through in these difficult times, which are unprecedented. And I believe that they're going to find that beauty in people like you. They are not going to find it from the scholars. I believe this so wholeheartedly. It is you guys who are going to be the people, like the companions who spread out. It is they didn't preach. They were not preachers, these companions. They just lived beautifully. And so I just want to, this vibe that Edina, you're creating here is just so beautiful and powerful. And I want to really thank you for that. And I pray that you have a lot of success with this, guys, in the community. Because even in my community here in Phoenix, I don't have 37 people who are like, same wavelength thing. We have pockets here. But I do think this is a wave that can really be powerful, because people need Islam, not because we want them to be Muslim, because they deserve to have a beautiful life. And I really believe that we have something beautiful here that I want you guys to just continue moving forward with. It's going to be hard. It'll be difficult. But like, if we can't do it, like, why should people believe in Islam if we ourselves aren't like lit by the message, right? Why would they want to be attracted to that? And so just continue with that. By the way, I put a link. I think it should be the right link to my YouTube channel. And I'm saying that as a plug, but also plug because the language that I use is the same language that you're using. And I actually will go I actually am going detailed through every single year of the Sirah with the Quran, every single chapter of the Quran in this language of self-empowerment, leadership, leaning into it, and so forth. So if that's helpful for you, would love for you to be a part of that. But I'm just like happy to be a part of your community, and thank you so much for inviting me.
You are so welcome. Thank you. You played a big part in making it possible, and I'm sure that's happening in other places as well. I have just put into the chat box the link to the evaluation for this class. It's an anonymous evaluation. It's just 6 questions. This has been an experiment, as you know, and it's an ongoing experiment, and we are going to continue on this journey together of learning and questioning and growing our hearts. And so I really want your feedback. And it is, again, it's anonymous. So it's just some simple, what would you want more of? What do you want less of? What do you want to learn about kind of stuff? And so please just take a few minutes to do that. I even created a quick bit.ly for you, which is bit.ly/lifeoflight. So it's easy to access. This is just the end of one chapter of our learning journey together. And all of this has been made possible by the Islamic Center of Southern California, of which I am a proud member. And I have invited you to a lot of Islamic Center stuff, and I want to invite you to volunteer with the Islamic Center, even in these virtual times. You've heard about Sister Erica and the Social Services Committee. You know that there are a lot of different efforts that are going on, and I hope that you feel inspired by the story of Prophet Muhammad to find ways to act big and small, and to be a part of helping transform our community to meet this moment. The Islamic Center has been working on that even this week, and I hope that you all saw the Islamic we put out a statement about this week's latest layer of police brutality and in the wake of recent murders. And the Islamic Center is working more and more to be a mosque that reflects the social justice spirit of Prophet Muhammad, and that reflects the pioneers of the Islamic Center, for whom this has always been the defining characteristic of the community that we try to create and to make space for all of us to be in together, reflecting the Prophet's legacy. So volunteer, email info@islamiccenter.com to volunteer, or if you go to the website, islamiccenter.com, you can, there's a volunteer button there somewhere. You can also sign up for the newsletter there, because that's a great place to stay in touch with things. I'm gonna do a quick screen share so that you can see what the upcoming programs are. I will attach this to the follow-up email that I send out. And alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to God. The Islamic Center, like many mosques, is adapting to these virtual times and upping its program offerings. Based on the interest for the nightly program during Ramadan, will continue to be a few evening programs, spiritual resets and fireside chats with Sheikh Asim and Dr. Khulaki to continue to give a space to connect with both the text and each other. And you'll see on Sundays, starting next week, there will be a 4-part series by Dr. Najiba Saeed about peace, justice, and healing through the prophetic lens. So she is going to focus in on a different aspect of this every week, and it will be from 12 to 1 o'clock starting next Sunday for 4 Sundays. And then I'm going to stop my screen share, because then if you go back to the chat, you'll see also that the next follow-up to this class will start on July 19th, which is the series that you all asked for, which we're calling Hidden Figures, Tracing the History of Muslim Women Scholars. And I'm grateful to all of you for pushing for it, and I'm grateful to Dr. Alina Al-Saraf, the chair of the center, for making it happen in record time. so that we can pull it off. And I already have and I'm going to moderate it, and we have our 4 guests already. Dr. Amina Wadood, Dr. Asma Barlas, Dr. Asma Saeed, and Gail Kennard. And like this conversation, it will be a conversation where we center their knowledge and their scholarship, and we get the chance to pick their brains. And I'm really excited about that. The link to register now, so that you don't forget. If we register now, then Eventbrite will send you a reminder or plug it into your calendar automatically. So the link is there if you could sign up now. And that will also give us a sense of how much interest there is in the class. So those are some of the upcoming programs. And then in the evaluation, please share your ideas for class ideas. What you want to learn about is what we want to share with you. And while I do a lot of work behind the scenes at the Islamic Center, I am really loving this teaching space and would be happy to continue in the journey with you all, even beyond that hidden figure series. So let's keep figuring out what we want to study together, and we can make it happen. Okay. So this takes us to maybe the hardest part, which is the end. Before I give the dua, I made my only recording mistake in this whole series, and I forgot to hit record today until Dr. Miraj started speaking, and then I finally looked down and saw that record hadn't been hit. So after I do the dua and wave and smile goodbye, and everyone is gone, or for those of you who choose to remain, if you choose to, I am going to stay on and re-record the beginning about my learnings for those who were not here with us today, and to clean up after myself. So that's the that's the plan. Okay. So if you are not today, if you would like to sign off, please sign off fairly quickly today, so that I can keep moving with the recording to make up for that. Okay. Okay. So please turn on your camera so we can see each other before we close our eyes and make dua, if you choose to close your eyes, so that we can be in community together. What a gift it has been to see your faces every week. I just get more emotional as the weeks go on. For those of you who know me, that's not going to surprise you, but it's the walls are all down. Okay. I will do as I have done the last couple of weeks. Even though no one has taken me up on it, this is your last chance. Please speak up, participate in this dua. We have been through a lot together in these 10 weeks, including little Aya, who I see waving over there. Please add your dua after I say, Ya Allah, please hear our prayers. You are welcome to come off of mute and add your dua in. I will look at the chat box for any dua that might be there, and then I will close, okay? And I hope, again, that you participate. It's about our voices, not just mine. Okay. I wrote a little bit today because there's a lot on my heart. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh Allah, we come to you on this Sunday like we've come to you 9 Sundays before this, to know you better, to know your prophet better, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace and blessings be upon him, to know the people who are around him, who shaped him and who he shaped, and to understand the unfolding story of Islam that continues to inspire us today. Ya Allah, thank you for this blessing. Ya Allah, thank you for this blessing. Ya Allah, thank you for this blessing. For all of us, we express our gratitude, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, I pray for my teacher, Dr. Maher Hatut, who's the reason that I'm here doing this right now, and for his brother, Dr. Hassan Hatut, and for all those who planted and watered the Islamic Center for almost 60, 70 years now. Ya Allah, please shower them with your blessings and with your forgiveness and with your mercy, and give them beautiful eternal resting places, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, bless our teachers who I have not named, Ya Allah. Give them beautiful, beautiful places, Ya Allah, and give them sadaqah jariyah that continues for them. Ya Allah, we pray for the souls of those who have been murdered by racists in our country and around the world. Ya Allah, we come to you with heavy hearts as more tragedy unfolds around us, and we lean into our stories, into our minds and into our hearts and into our souls for action. Ya Allah, we pray for the souls of those with hateful hearts. We pray for their hearts that they be cleansed and that you open their hearts, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we pray for love that overwhelms them and shakes them to their core and rebuilds them anew. Ya Allah, we believe in your power to change hearts, to change minds, and we ask that you change ours and that you change the hearts and minds of those who are hateful, and that you transform them into loving hearts, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we pray that we act on the truth as we know it, that we act on the truth that our Black and brown brothers and sisters are in danger because of the color of their skin, and this is a violation of what you have taught us. Ya Allah, we pray to act for justice in your name. In your name, Ya Allah, we pray that we act for justice. Ya Allah, we ask the light us proudly and brightly, and that you allow us to reflect your light and the light of your prophet around us every single day and within us as well. Ya Allah, we ask that you will allow us to carry the spirit of Ramadan with us, of the slowness and the thoughtfulness and the intention and the care and the introspection and the stretching and the fresh growth. Ya Allah, may it carry us forward and keep us strong. Ya Allah, please keep us healthy and strong and empower us to know that we have power because you breathed life into each and every one of us, and you gave us the choice of what we do with our one precious life. Ya Allah, please shower your blessings on our beloved prophet, peace be upon him, on his wives, on his loved ones, and all those who worked with him and around him, and all those who have come after him serving you. Ya Allah, bless our ancestors, our parents, our spouses, and our offspring, and give us the patience and the light to be a positive force all around us. Ya Allah, please hear our prayers. May Allah relieve everyone's suffering, give us all the strength to fight injustice and spread love together. Ya Allah, we worship you, and our hearts have come together to serve you, and we thank you for this opportunity. Keep our hearts together and in love with your prophet, peace be upon him, and striving always to follow in his footsteps. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen. Thank you all. This has been major. I'm really grateful to all of you. May Allah bless you all for choosing to join the journey. And my heart has grown exponentially. And I'm grateful to all of you for giving me this space and honoring me with your time. And I ask for your forgiveness for taking more of your time than I promised. And I'm so grateful to you for sticking with it. And I'm excited to see what we get to do next together. And I'm grateful to the Islamic Center of Southern California for all of it. So thank you, Dr. Miraj. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, friends in Turkey. I see you far away. And friends close by here in Pasadena. I see you close by. And everyone in between. Please fill out the evaluation. Please sign up for the next class. And with that, I love you and I leave you, as Dr. Hassan Hathout used to say. Take care, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. And stay in touch.
Bye.
Alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah. You're beautiful.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We love you. We can't wait to see you again.
I love you too. I can't wait to see you too. I hope you get to come back soon.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. May God bless all of you and jazakum al khair. And thank you so much, Sister Edina, for this. This has been amazing for all of us. May God bless.
And for me too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you get to choose whether you stay or go while I re-record the beginning. All right, folks who are still on, I'm going to restart for what I forgot when I forgot to hit record. Thank you for staying. I'm going to now reset and let me put any remaining folks on mute. Here we go. And I'm going to reset from the beginning and share with you some of my key learnings from this process. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As a reset, this is our last class of Prophet Muhammad, A Life of Light, and as you already know, I am overcome with emotion because this has been an incredible journey, and that is thanks to all of you, and thanks to the Islamic Center for providing the opportunity to for me to go on this journey and to invite you all to be a part of it, and for compensating me for my time and valuing my efforts in the process. This is the 10th session, and we're blessed to have Dr. Miraj with us today, who you've all already heard from, and you've gotten a taste of his light, of his inspiration for the book and his approach to the Sirah. And so I want to reshare with you now what I shared at the beginning, which is what some of my key learnings have been from this journey of exploring the Sirah. There are roughly 10 of them. When I did this the first time, I lost track of the number because I went out of order, but we'll see how I do this time. For me, we'll start with the lens. When I first started this class, what I wanted to focus on was 4 different lenses to examine Prophet Muhammad's story through. Those are character, critical thinking, community, and leadership. And these are some of the guiding factors that I have always looked at in his story. And I wanted to drill down to find the stories and examples that would really bring it to life. And what we saw over and over again is that character led everything with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That before he was the prophet, he was al-Amin, he was the trustworthy, and that he had this beautiful character that where people trusted him. But what I learned in the process too is that he also had a huge amount of trust in people, no matter who they were, whether they were Muslim or non-Muslim, whether they were on his side or not on his side, or whether they were even his declared enemies. He gave people so many chances, even to the point where then Allah corrected him or coached him to do things differently, and asked him to rein it in. And that's not something that that I knew before this journey, and it really inspired me to think about how he applied all 4 lenses: character, critical thinking, community, and leadership, to his lifelong journey, but also to specifically to his prophetic journey, because he was so trustworthy. What I think about is that he was able to, over and over again, he dealt with individuals in a gentle way. And the gentleness of that is really remarkable, considering how much he had on the line and how much pressure you might assume that the prophet of God might feel to deliver on his mission and please his creator. But he dealt with individuals gently and with an open heart. And that's what set him apart. And that included even his ex-enemies, like when the people of Mecca, the Quraysh, when they converted in mass numbers after the conquest of Mecca, he didn't question their conversion. He accepted them as they were. And he asked the Sahaba, the earlier Muslims, to do the same. And he trusted so many people who were not Muslim at multiple points in his prophetic journey, from his uncle Abu Talib to the guides that he hired to take them through the hijrah from Mecca to Yathrib, which later became Medina, and then let alone also other protectors and guardians that he had. He had this spirit of openness, and I feel that's the main message in all of the stories about the prophet is always the core is the character, and that he was sent to perfect our character. So that's number one, and it's a big one. Number two is that when I started this journey, I had talked so much about sources that because of my media background and media training, I double and triple check sources, and I care who said it and how we know that they actually said it. And so part of me has been a skeptical consumer of the Sirah for so many years because of the fluidity of some of the Hadith literature or the unreliability of it. And but 10 sessions later, what I realized, thanks to Dina's question last time, is that I have really fallen in love with the stories, which you all have experienced because classes have gotten longer. It's harder for me to decide which stories to cut out because so many of them felt relevant and felt like they had lessons. And I became less obsessed with how do we know that that one is true, and also more comfortable asking or saying it is alleged that this verse was revealed in this context, and God knows best. And having that kind of trusting relationship with the Quran and with the Sirah has been really profound for me. And I also, and this is exactly what I hoped for me and for all of us, is that we would develop a closer relationship to the Prophet Muhammad and also to our Creator through Prophet Muhammad, through the vehicle that he gave the Quran to, and that this would soften our hearts and enliven our minds all at the same time. And that has definitely happened. The other thing that has happened is that I am continuing to navigate my relationship with miracles in the Prophet's lifetime because of the deep knowledge that he was merely a man. And I am pleased to report that I'm in a better position a better place personally, spiritually, with the miracles, especially as they're related to Angel Jibril and his role, both in the first revelation and his ongoing relationship with Prophet Muhammad to confirm the message of the Quran, and then his role in the Isra wal Miraj, the miraculous night journey. And how profound that is. And that ultimately, while I'm still obsessed with knowing what's true and what the truth is, that having this whole treasure chest of stories to know Prophet Muhammad better through has been incredible. And I imagine if it's done that for me, that it's also hopefully done that for all of you as well. And that has been a big part of my intention, and I'm grateful that it has panned out. Number three. Well, I sort of already said this. It's deepened my relationship with the Prophet and the Quran, which was my original goal. And the thing I didn't say is that one of my dreams for the past 20 years or so, since I became a student of Dr. Maher's, especially in his Quran class, was to read the Quran in the order in which it was revealed. Because the way that the Quran is organized and that we read it today, it was organized by people after the Prophet's death, and I always was intrigued by reading the Quran in order, so that I could experience it and integrate it in the way that the earliest Muslims did. And this class has given me the closest opportunity for this. I have Dr. Maher. Lauren Hamill once gave me a list that he found in a book of the best approximation they had ascertained about the order of revelation, and I had used that previously. But having this class and this experience and being able to experience the Quran as it was revealed year by year, or at least in close approximation, has deepened and renewed my relationship with the Quran in tremendous ways, and that has been awesome. Okay, number four. vulnerability time, which is that there are parts of the Sira that I was squeamish about before I started this class. When I thought about teaching it, I thought, okay, I know I can read the books and I can synthesize information and I can draw lessons, but what about the places I don't want to go? And how will I deal with those in an authentic and transparent way with both myself and with all of you as colleagues in this journey? And so the parts that I felt squeamish about turned out to be profoundly eye-opening. And as I mentioned earlier to the students, I think it's a Carl Jung quote. He's a psychologist, psychoanalyst, and he has said in a short way, into the cave you must go. Or at least that's my approximation of it. And it's the idea that some of the places that have the biggest shadows have the biggest learnings for us. And that's exactly what my experience has been during this journey, is looking at the places where I felt that there were shadows. So 3 examples for me are the wives of Muhammad, of Prophet Muhammad after Khadija. I have had an ambiguous understanding of why and how and why for all of these years, and delving deeper into each of their stories, and also thinking about the Quran and Gail's khutbah on the topic added a whole new dimension that really has empowered me so much. Another example is the treatment of some of the Jewish tribes in Medina, particularly those tribes that got expelled, and the situations in which targeted executions took place of traitors. And yeah, that was hard and ambiguous space for me that I didn't have good sources on previously, and it was illuminating to be able to have more nuance and understanding around the isolated nature of what actually took place. And then lastly is all the battles and expeditions and caravan raids. I am a peacemaker, I'm anti-violence, and while I know self-defense is allowed, I have never really been interested in the stories of the battles, and have felt that there is too much emphasis on them in our teaching of the Sira. And during this journey, I have been able to really think hard about both about Prophet Muhammad as a strategic leader who both led and followed when the time called for it, and how he continued to adapt and take advice from diverse people who had more experience or know-how than he did in particular situations, and how sometimes that worked out for him and sometimes it didn't, but he continued to do it because he trusted people and he relied on people and he knew his own limitations. Which is what takes me to number 5 or 6, which is that Prophet Muhammad was a living embodiment of an idea that I've carried with me for years, which is that the idea of meeting the moment. I actually started a podcast last year by the same name because in my work in Muslim activism post 9/11, on the national stage and often in front of media cameras asking Islamophobic questions, I have had to learn about Islam often through a defensive lens where, Fox News is bringing up Sharia. Okay, what do we know about Sharia? And then become an instant expert and then not have much time to integrate for myself spiritually the meaning and the place of that knowledge. And now having this slower, thoughtful process and looking at the story as it unfolds, I'm so much more grateful for all of the ways that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, demonstrated what it means to meet the moment over and over and over again. He leaned into discomfort and not knowing what he was doing, and he relied on other people, and he spoke his insecurities to those he trusted most, and he wasn't afraid to express his emotions. And he was pushed beyond his boundaries over and over and over again, and yet he remained patiently persevered perseverant as his creator asked him to be. And so he adapted his tactics while staying true to his core self. And that, I think, speaks so much to what one of the takeaways that we should use to inspire our lives every day is no matter what happens, he stayed focused, and he was human. He made mistakes, and God even coached him and checked him and corrected him, and it only continued to bolster him in his mission. It didn't stop him or discourage him, and that's incredibly powerful. Okay, just a few more. I think this is number 6 or 7. Prophet Muhammad also was not afraid to compromise when he needed to. So and even when it disturbed his own people. And I imagine him as a leader really having to grapple with what to do. And the prime example of this is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which took place 7 years, I believe, after the Hijrah. And when Prophet Muhammad had a vision that he should take the people for their first Umrah to Mecca, and they went out there and tried to do it, but they were denied entry over and over and over again. They tried to negotiate, and they didn't get anywhere. And so what did Prophet Muhammad do, peace be upon him? He agreed to compromise and to negotiate, and this led to a breakthrough treaty. And he was strategic in his compromise, because while he had to give up his title on paper of Prophet Muhammad, or Prophet of God, Prophet of Allah, because the Quraysh didn't believe in that, and that really disturbed his own people. He was not confused, because he had his eyes on the prize. In his eyes, the prize in this case was a peace treaty that would buy him time and space and safety to remaneuver his strategy. So through the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, while it gave the Quraysh the upper hand in terms of the Muslims had to send back any defectors from Mecca who chose to go to Medina to join the Muslims. Well, the Muslims would have to send them back to Mecca. Well, the Muslims agreed that the Meccans didn't have to send back any defectors from the other side, and that they would send back Muslims who were trying to defect from Mecca. He allowed for that because of the bigger picture, which was 10 years of peace, 10 years in which he could focus not on just security and survival and protecting his people from the Quraysh, but that he could now look outward towards the region and spread the message of Islam to other people who didn't have the information and weren't as hostile. And that's exactly what he did. Again, even though his own people were confused by this in the moments that it was happening, he saw the bigger picture, and he believed in compromise as a necessary tool, not as a necessary evil. And that should be critical for us as we think about how to deal with hard situations in our lives. Next one is he was a phenomenal communicator. I'm a communications person, and all of the ways that he was able to address the person in front of him in a way that would hit the spot are incredible to me. And the ways that he was able to dig deep into his experiences and his heart to shower mercy on people and show them gentleness. Again, phenomenal communicator. Okay, 2 more. In his story, I also notice that many of the lowest lows are paired with the highest highs. And conversely, the highest highs are paired with the lowest lows. So I'll give you 2 examples. And that this is a demonstration of the فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, surely with hardship comes ease, and surely with hardship comes ease. It's also how Prophet Muhammad experienced it. And so it should be a lesson to us. So the first example is in year 10 of his prophetic mission. It's called the year of sadness, because he lost the people who were the dearest and dearest to him, that he loved the most and who offered him the greatest protection. That was his beloved wife Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib. He lost them both in the same year. And the sorrow was so deep, and it was one of his lowest lows. Well, lo and behold, less than a year later, he had he participated, or he got to do the miraculous night journey, the Isra wa Miraj, where Prophet Jibril, where Angel Jibril himself took Prophet Muhammad on this miraculous night journey, whether it was a vision or a literal journey that allowed him to experience the miracle of God, and that also solidified, or that's the place where we get the tradition of the 5 daily salat, the daily ritual prayers, that all of that took place during that time, and that it re-infused him with energy and reconfirmed his light. So that low moment was also paired with this amazing high at right afterwards. The second example happens years later, around year 20, when Prophet Muhammad and the Muslim leads the Muslims in the conquest of Mecca. This is one of the apexes in the journey of Islam. After they have been basically driven out of Mecca after all those years and chased down by the Quraysh, and they have found a way to hold their own, and now they are going to reclaim Mecca. And how does Prophet Muhammad do it? He does it peacefully. He strategically does it peacefully, even though during this same, again, before and after this period, there were violent conflicts that were taking place. This one, and reclaiming Mecca, would be done with the letter and the spirit, not just the letter, but also the spirit of Islam, and it was done peacefully. During this highest of high moments, when he was able to clear the Kaaba of the idols and again come home as a victor, he also, in the immediate aftermath of that, had to deal with internal divisions. They weren't external anymore. Now they were internal, and they came from his own people, from the original Sahaba who watched as Prophet Muhammad handed out the spoils of the conquest of Mecca, to the newest Muslims who were converting actively, because now that they had been they had the choice of doing that or paying the tax for protection, or paying for protection. And these Sahaba challenged him. They came to him and said, like, basically, what's up? Like, we thought that we were your OG people. Why are they getting all the stuff? And he had to reassure them and remind them, and it's documented in the Quran, how he had to reassure them that their place was elevated, and that these things were impressive to the newer Muslims, but that these older Muslims had a deeper level of knowing and of connection in their hearts, and that they would be guaranteed paradise. That happened, and also there was internal division among his wives. Again, remember, there were 8 to 10, there were 10 or 11 women, right, collectively who came after Khadija, and there were internal divisions among them, and they placed pressures on Prophet Muhammad's time. Again, the Quran, God got involved and put a question to the wives about whether they gave them the choice of staying and being part of this prophetic family, or choosing to be free, and that they didn't have to do this. There's no compulsion, even though they had married the prophet. And the prophet had to take space from his own wives and to reset the whole situation. So while, again, the conquest of Mecca took place, just after that, he had to deal with these internal divisions. Like, talk about a potential like buzzkill, but he really he had to lean into both sides of it with equal measures of his character. And he did. So the lows are paired with the highs, and the highs are paired with the lows. And we too should expect that that's how it's going to operate in our lives. And I needed that reminder. I'll keep it at that. Okay, lastly, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where did he start? He was orphaned and illiterate. And when I think about who this soul was, this spirit was, that Prophet Muhammad, that Allah chose, that God chose to be this vessel, this vehicle for the sacred message, and to send a message to all of mankind, it's incredible who he chose always, right? And in this situation, this orphan who lived in 5 different households in 8 years, in his first 8 years, who didn't have the sense of security or traditional family, who was a loner and both independent and also reliant on others, and also constantly aware of the outsider and how this was tied to his mission, and how it was also tied to the success of his mission, because he elevated and centered orphans, widows, wayfarers, the downtrodden, those being economically exploited, all of those who were being persecuted against because of their background, those who were persecuted for their gender. All of those divisions he worked to erase. And so much of this can be connected to his own personal depth of experience of what it feels like. And this is part of how Allah formed him and shaped him and prepared him for his prophetic mission. And so, of course, the Quran, God chose an orphan to share the message, and the message is rooted in taking care of orphans, widows, and all of those who were exploited and forgotten in society. And so ultimately, as I think about Prophet Muhammad's life, and I think about this journey through these 9 sessions, going over the 63 years of his life, I, like so many things, I go full circle, and I go back to thinking about who he was and how the journey shaped him, and how much we have to be grateful for him and to him, and love for giving him to us as a vessel, a gentle vessel of mercy, and a beacon of light, a beacon giving light that reflects God's light and gives us the opportunity to also know that we have light within us, and that we too can live lives of light. And so these are some of my key takeaways that I shared earlier in slightly different language, and I hope that they have been beneficial to you. And I will end again by telling you how grateful I am for this experience, and and how excited I am to continue to be in community with you and other members of the Islamic Center near and far. And so I'll make one more plug to ask you to please give generously to the Islamic Center of Southern California, so that we can do more classes and workshops and events and lectures and all that stuff to support you in your spiritual journey. Jazakallah khair. I ask for your forgiveness for my mistakes and for stretching out time once again in my favor, and I hope that all of this has been beneficial for you. May Allah bless you and make your path easy, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. All right, I love you and I leave you, as Dr. Hassan used to say. All right, salam alaikum, and thank you to those who stayed on for the second round. Thank you.
May God bless you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, you're welcome.